Against Time. That was Stephen King's take on the book. And the book as historical fiction, King said, this might be a book where we really have a chance to get an audience who's not my ordinary audience. Instead of people who read horror stories, people who read The Help or people of the book might like this also. But they had to do an immense amount of research in this. And I have to say, I can't say enough about this book. I absolutely love this book. A lot of people do. And of course, you gotta love Sadie. I'll go into his characters a little bit so you get an idea who we're talking about. Just a thought. And we'll get into a little bit of the time travel. So, his characters, you have Jake Epping. He's an English teacher at a high school in Maine, of course. And he uses the alias George Amberson when he travels back and to track Lee Harvey Oswald's movements. But part of Jake's time is spent in Jody, a small town on the outskirts of Dallas, where he becomes an English teacher for a school and becomes well-liked by the students. He's eventually successful in foiling the assassination attempt, but learns that doing so has set his 21st century world on a catastrophic path. You have Al Templeton. He's the proprietor of Al's Diner and longtime acquaintance of Jake, of course. And he shares the secret of the time portal and of his plan to prevent the assassination of JFK. But his plan has been thwarted by his cigarette smoking, leading to terminal lung cancer. And he convinces Jake to carry out his plan. And he commits suicide by overdosing on his pain meds. You have Harry and Frank Dunning. Harry is a janitor at the high school and a student in Jake's GED class. And he wrote a paper about the night his father murdered his mother and siblings with a hammer. Okay. This provides Jake with motivation in a test case to see if history can be changed. So, we shall see what happens there. And when Jake travels back a second time, most of his family members, Harry's family members are saved. But Harry serves in the Vietnam War and is killed in the Tet Offensive. A third time he goes back, Harry survives Vietnam but is wheelchair bound. Frank Dunning is the father of Harry, the one who committed the murders, killing his wife and two of Harry's brothers and hurting Harry badly. He left his sister in a coma, and Jake set out to murder Frank to prevent the killing from happening. Deacon Simmons, Deke. He's the principal of the school in Jody, Texas, who hires George Amberson. He becomes Jake's good friend and one of only two 1960 people in whom Jake confides his mission to. And the librarian, Sadie Dunhill, becomes Jake's girlfriend. And she's from Savannah, Georgia. She's run away from her abusive and psychotic husband. Johnny becomes Jake's. Her husband's name is Johnny, but Sadie becomes Jake's lover and fiance. But Johnny, her husband, tracks her down, her ex-husband, and holds her hostage to lure Jake in. Jake frees Sadie, who is severely disfigured during the ordeal. Johnny commits suicide. Jake and Sadie reconcile, and Sadie ends up helping Jake prevent Oswald from shooting Kennedy. She is killed in the confrontation, but she comes back to life once Jake resets the timeline. She survives Johnny's rampage without Jake's help and is still alive in 2012. Ellen Mizzelli, she's a teacher who replaces Deke Simmons as principal. and becomes a good friend of Sadie and George and admires the latter as a teacher. But she discovers his references are fake. She becomes angry at his refusal to tell Sadie what he's up to, but she does remain quiet. But a lot of research went into this. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, who offered their gratitude to Jake during telephone calls. There's a lot going on in here. It is just phenomenal. So basically you have the plot that he wants to go back and stop the assassination, thinking everything that happened since his death could have been a lot better. So let's get into the meat of the story here. Very good, very good, very good. Okay. Of course, you just met some of the characters, the main characters, of course. And Jake Epping he's recently divorced, high school English teacher in Lisbon Falls, Maine, of course. And he's earning extra money teaching a GED class. He gives an assignment to his adult students, asking them to write about a day that changed their lives. And one of the students, he's learning impaired janitor named Harry Dunning, submits an assignment describing the night his alcoholic father murdered his mother and siblings with a hammer and injured Harry, causing him brain damage. Of course, this affects Jake, and the two become friends after Harry earns his GED. If you guys have read this book and seen the series, please, James Franco is fabulous as Jake Epping. It couldn't have been anybody better, I don't think. So 2 years later, in June 2011, Jake stops by a local diner and talks with Al, the proprietor. And Al asks Jake to meet him at his diner the next day. When Jake arrives, he is shocked to see that Al seems to have aged years since the previous day. And Al explains that he is dying and that his appearance is due to his having time traveled and lived for years in the past. Al's method of time travel is a time portal he discovered in his diner's pantry, which he used to transport himself to 1958. Of course, Jake's like, yeah, right, and he doubts his story until he travels through the porthole, where he encounters an adult wino whom Al has dubbed the Yellow Card Man, and that's due to the yellow card on his hat. He spends an hour in 1958 before returning to the present, after which Al explains he's figured out the basics of how the portal functions. 1. Every journey through the portal transports the traveler to September 9th, 1958 at 11:50 a.m. every time. 2. No matter how long someone stays in the past, hours, days, weeks, or years, only 2 minutes elapse when they return to 2011. 3. Past events can be changed, however. Subsequent use of the portal resets the timeline and nullifies all changes made on the previous visit. And the obdurate past throws up obstacles to prevent history from being changed. Such resistance is proportional to the magnitude of the change. So if it's a small change, it's going to be a small obstacle. Preventing an assassination, you're going to have some pretty big obstacles with that. So, and Al reveals that after discovering the porthole, he's concocted a plan to change the past by preventing the assassination, hoping that doing so would change history for the better. He stated many bad things that happened in the world to events that would not have occurred if JFK had lived. He spent 4 years in the past after entering the portal the previous night, traveling to Dallas, Texas, to track Lee Harvey Oswald, and plotting to kill the assassin during his attempted murder of the General Edwin Walker. His delay was due to the fact that he wanted to be absolutely sure that Oswald was a killer and would act alone. But Al developed cancer, so he had to give up his mission, knowing he would not live long enough to complete it. And he ends up recruiting Jake, who was very reluctant at first, to take his place. So, as an experiment, Jake travels back to 1958 in Derry, Maine, to save Harry's family, who will be killed by his father, Frank, on Halloween night. Despite many obstacles, he succeeds in saving all but one of Harry's siblings. He returns to 2011, hopeful he will have improved Harry's life, only to learn his actions led to Harry dying in Vietnam. So Jake is trying to process all this information. And in the meantime, Al commits suicide, forcing Jake to act immediately before his death is known and the diner is closed. So, excuse me. There's no preparation here. He hasn't had time to do anything. So Jake re-enters the portal and discovers that the yellow card man has cut his own throat and the yellow card is now black. He ignores it and goes to Derry to kill Frank ahead of Frank's murderous rampage. After resolving one of Al's other missions, preventing a hunter from accidentally shooting a little girl, Jake makes his way to Florida, then to the small Dallas area town of Jody to wait for Oswald's arrival. Jake spends years establishing his identity in the 50s and early 60s, but comes to suspect history harmonizes. He keeps coming into contact with people of the same name with similar events. He suspects saving one life may result in another person dying in their stead. For example, in Dallas, he meets librarian Sadie Dunhill, and the two begin a relationship. Their relationship becomes strained as Sadie is suspicious of Jake's use of knowledge of song lyrics that haven't been written yet, such as Honky Tonk Woman by the Rolling Stones. However, Jake rescues her from a near-fatal overdose, as well as an assault by her ex-husband, Johnny. And after successfully predicting the outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis, he tells her he is from the future. Imagine that. Somebody who knows this, how would you take it? How would you take it if your loved one said he or she was from the future and knew things that were going to happen? In the meantime, Jake stalks Oswald, renting apartments near those of the Oswalds. He begins to wonder if Oswald's only friend in Dallas, George, may somehow be involved, and thus hesitates to kill Oswald ahead of time. He thinks de Mohrenschildt is a CIA resource who is supposed to keep an eye on Oswald, but he may also be egging Oswald on to kill first General Walker and then JFK. So Jake resolves to wait until the Walker attempted assassination before killing him. However, there are certain facts he's unable to get a hold of, and he is prevented from accessing several opportunities to kill Oswald. So, finally, comes the day, November 22nd, 1963, and everything going wrong. In order to prevent him from his date with Destiny, he is only able to reach Oswald seconds before the fateful moment when Kennedy's motorcade drives through Dealey Plaza. Nevertheless, he successfully prevents Oswald from shooting JFK. And in a rage, Oswald fires at Jake, but he ultimately kills Sadie, now Jake's fiancée, who came to help him. Oswald is then killed by outside fire. Jake is interrogated by the Dallas police and the FBI, who try to determine whether he was Oswald's accomplice. He has conversations with both the president and the first lady. He is numb to all of it because he has already decided to travel back to 2011 and then back again to save Sadie. He leaves Dallas by bus late on the night of November 22nd, and after he returns to New England, he learns that on November 25th, a massive earthquake in LA has killed thousands, and he realizes it is a direct result of his actions. Okay, there go by the saying, for every action there is a reaction. So whatever you try to change, there's going to be some consequences involved somewhere. When he gets back to the portal, the yellow card man has been replaced by Zach, a respectable-looking man with a green card. And Zach explains that traveling through the portal does not change the past, but creates multiple time strings, stretching the bonds of reality. and guarding it is difficult because the men dispatched